From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
Has there ever been as much change from a national championship game participant that we will see for the Washington Huskies going to that national runner-up team 14-1 in 2023 to what we're going to see from the Huskies in 2024, a brand new coaching staff, tons of player movement, and a brand new conference. To talk everything Washington spring game, the first real glimpse we have at the 2024 version of Washington led by Jedd Fisch, we welcome in our buddy Roman Tomashov from Huskies Wire at USA Today. Roman, when you talk about Washington's move and you talk about all the losses, their move to the Big Ten Conference, of course, it starts with the trenches. And when you talk about a lot of those losses, you also talk about the trenches for the Dogs down there in Seattle. What are some of the matchups and what are some of the position battles that we should be aware of when we look at this spring game in terms of the interior on the offensive line and the defensive line?
Ooh, well, I mean, that's a fantastic question when you're replacing all 9 starters when you think about the offensive line, you think about the defensive line. And as of right now, I would say that the Huskies are looking for 7 starters because right tackle is solidified in Drew Azzopardi, San Diego State transfer, who is one of the top available offensive tackle prospects in the portal. And I think that left guard or center, depending on where Jedd Fisch and offensive line coach and offensive coordinator Brennan Carroll want to slot him, is guard Memelar, who was actually expected to start last fall, but suffered a knee injury in August right before the start of the season. So we didn't get to see him at all last year, and he probably would have been the starting left guard last year. So getting those 2 guys, it's a good start, but as we record this on April 28th, Washington is still looking for some help with the transfer portal, especially along the offensive line. Center Landon Hatchett, who was a revelation as a true freshman, even though he's a 4-star prospect. He did a really nice job for the Huskies and Sparks last year. And as he continues to work his way back from his own injury that he suffered in December leading up to the Sugar Bowl, that would be another piece where, if you're able to solidify that, you can start looking at some of the high-end prospects that Washington has brought in over the last couple of years, like 4-star true freshman Paki Finau, who's been a nice piece so far. I really like him. I think he's got a whole lot of upside, but needs to add a little bit of weight. You can start looking at 3-star prospects, Sione Fasolo at left tackle, maybe 4-star prospect Elijah Jaquette. Both of those guys are redshirt freshmen who are super talented, but they're a little bit untested and have been a little up and down throughout the course of spring practices so far. And then you look at the defensive line, the one position that is definitely solidified is edge rusher Zach Durfee, the former Sioux Falls transfer, sat out a lot of last year with a let's just call it an NCAA issue where they didn't want to clear him and it was ridiculous, but it is what it is. We're past that. So getting that guy healthy after he suffered an elbow injury in camp, he's supposed to be good to go by the start of fall camp. So that's going to be a really big piece. Getting Montana State transfer Sebastian Valdez is going to be really nice. Yep. He can definitely wreak some havoc on the interior. And then, outside of that, junior Javon Parker is somebody who I'm expecting to step into a bigger role at defensive tackle. He's been a really, really nice rotational piece through his first 2 years. And then there are a whole bunch of other guys that you can think about when it comes to that other defensive end spot, whether it be Maurice Himes, Voit Tanufi, Lance Holtzclaw. There's a whole bunch of talent in the room. It's just mainly young and mainly unproven. So I really like all the pieces that are there. It's just a matter of who's going to step up.
Yeah, there's a lot of young pieces. There's a lot of moving parts, right, in the trenches, and we know how important that is to success in this conference. Let's move to the skill positions because there's a lot to be excited about at the skill positions. Of course, the one skill position that really matters is the quarterback position. They got it solidified with Will Rogers, keeping him in town. Jedd Fisch and his staff was able to get Will Rogers to come out of the transfer portal. But you look at some of those other quarterbacks that have entered the transfer portal. You look at Austin Mack following Kalen DeBoer. Recently, DeMarcus Davis also entered the transfer portal. But you're really high on DeMond Williams, who followed Jedd Fisch, his original commitment, his original signing from Arizona, and now he follows him into Washington. What do you want to see from DeMond and really this quarterback room as a whole to really prove to you that not only this year, but the future is solidified at this position in Seattle?
So let's start with DeMond Williams, because I would say that DeMond is probably the biggest reason that DeMarcius Davis entered the transfer portal, because he has just looked head and shoulders. And I think DeMarcius is a fantastic prospect, got a really big arm as he continues to fill out his frame. I think he could be a really, really nice dual threat moving forward, but it's just clear that DeMond has that it factor. I know it's a really silly cliche thing to say, but when you watch him, he's got electric legs. He puts zip on the ball. Especially for a I don't want to say he's undersized because he's really well, filled out when it comes to just like how he's built. But for a 5'10", whatever he's listed at, 190-pound true freshman, the game has not looked too fast for him or anything like that at any point over the course of spring ball. And he's gotten some reps with the starters. He's done a lot of really, really nice things and looks to be a really fantastic succession plan for Will Rogers, who Will Rogers, I don't want to say he's been bad, but he just hasn't been exceptional over the course of fall camp. And he looks exactly like what, even when Kalen DeBoerstaff was here, he was meant to be, which is a stopgap quarterback who is going to do a job, is going to be really, really solid. He's not, I don't want to call him a game manager because that's demeaning to what he is, or he can certainly make some plays and put the ball in the right spot. But DeMond, whenever it is that he takes over, he seems like he truly has a chance to be the guy for a while.
And that's exciting for Husky fans and very interesting also what you had to say about Will. You kind of look at what he was able to do at Mississippi State. Maybe not the strongest arm pushing the football down the field, a lot to that short to medium passing game, putting up big numbers as well over there in Mike Leach's system at Mississippi State. Let's go over to some of the other skill positions, and there are some things to be excited about. You look at first that running back room, Cam Davis, who was banged up last year, he comes back. Jonah Coleman comes back, the leading rusher from Arizona last season. How about Jeremiah Hunter, the leading receiver at Cal the past 2 seasons? Denzel Boston, Giles Jackson. There are some pieces here kind of stacking up for these Washington backs and receivers. Who are kind of some names maybe outside of those guys that you're looking forward to? And what do you want to see from the skill positions to prove that this could be an offense that we know it's not going to be like last year? That's a generational offense. But what do you want to see for them to say, hey, this can be a pretty good offense in the Big Ten in 2024?
So I've got a perfect answer to your question, but I have to start with Denzel Boston because Denzel Boston has been far and away the best player at Washington spring practices so far. He looks like a guy who has sat behind Rome Odunze for 2 years with a similar frame and a similar skill set that looks ready to explode. And he has done that through every single spring practice, or seriously, every day. All the media, everybody in attendance, as Jedd Fisch has had a lot of these practices be open. Everybody who's been there, he has made a play that has just made everybody just stop and go, whoa. And I'm somebody who was very high on Jeremiah Hunter when he was at Cal. I really like what he's been able to do. He's really strong. He shows elite body control. And Denzel, for somebody who's just a sophomore, looks better. And I really like both these guys. And one of my takes is that I believe that Jedd Fisch's offense and it can continue what Kalen DeBoer's did while it was here and support 2,000-yard receivers. And I think both those guys have a chance to do that if the offensive line holds up. But Ted, to answer your question, I want to talk about Rasheed Williams for a second. Former 4-star recruit who's a redshirt freshman this year. He's somebody who has definitely demonstrated that he can play all over the field. He's big, he's physical, he can play in the slot, he can play on the outside. And he's somebody who, especially when he's been working with Damon Williams, is somebody who's turned into a real security blanket. And I really like the talent that he's got. And, depending on if they decide to bring in a transfer at the position, they've been really interested in Arizona State's Elijah Badger. If they don't end up bringing a transfer, I think that he has a chance to play the same role that Jeremy Bernard did in the offense in 2023.
Moving from the offensive side to the defensive side, there are, once again, a lot of moving pieces. That's kind of a theme, right, that we're establishing with Seattle here in spring practice as we move forward to the fall. Steve Belichick takes over as defensive coordinator at Washington. You have 3 of your top 5 leading tacklers kind of coming back to this defense. So there are some pieces solidified, but there are a good amount of pieces that are also moving within this defense. What do you want to see in the spring game that will kind of show you that this offense is making strides as we approach September?
So the biggest thing that I want to see is I want to see what the back 4, back 5 is going to look like, where it's probably going to be, some iteration of a 3-3-5 in some sense. Just it's going to be a lot of the stuff that you've seen from Steve and Bill Belichick over the last whatever amount of time you want to call it. I know Steve's only been calling plays for the last 4 years in New England, but it really is going to be just an iteration of that defense. Quarterback Thaddeus Dixon told me where, I depressed him a little bit, just be like, hey man, I'm a Patriots fan. I know the film. I know what I've seen for my entire life watching the Patriots. And he said, yeah, it's going to be a very similar style of defense what the Patriots run in terms of some of the different things that they're asking us to do. They're going to have a lot of help over the top, which is really different from what William Inges and Chuck Morrell's defense was, where they played a lot of cover zero. And we're going to see a whole lot of fun things in the back end, I want to say, where there's going to be a lot of flexibility. There's going to be a lot of versatility, guys moving all over the place, disguises, just a whole bunch of different things that we haven't seen from this Washington defense over the last 2 years. And I think it has a chance to be one of the better defenses in college football if the scheme can, be installed correctly.
One last thing to wrap things up. How cool has it been able to see guys like Pete Carroll and Bill Belichick at practice, and what has kind of been some of the reaction around Husky Nation, and being able to have those guys at your practice? That's got to mean something.
It's amazing. So I'll tell you a quick story here. So Bill Belichick was out here for the coaches clinic that Washington hosts every year, and so there were about couple hundred high school coaches that were in attendance, watching practice from inside the indoor facility that Washington has here. And me as a Patriots fan, it blew my mind anyway. Just absolutely over the moon to be able to see some of these things. But I just remember the feeling and just all the senses that you had when Bill Belichick walked in the room, where there's a practice going on in the back room. There are hundreds of people in the room that are all having conversations. And when Bill Belichick walked into the room, everything just felt like it froze. Everything felt like it stopped. Where, all of a sudden he's like 5 feet from me, which again, just totally blew my mind. But all of a sudden you could feel every single eye in the room just turn and just, that's Bill Belichick right there. And you can see that, like, it's the same thing with Pete Carroll when John Lynch was in town. It's just unbelievable, some of the things that Jedd Fisch has been able to do so far.
I love that social media clip that they put on, I think it was Twitter, maybe some other platforms, of Pete Carroll, right? He's been competition, all the way going back to his USC days, and they kind of let him get in there and really have a couple of guys go head-to-head. You love to see that fire and energy, especially at his age. Roman, it's always great to talk to you. It's going to be fun to see Washington in this spring game as they make their journey to the Big Ten. Always good to talk to you, as always.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.